In the harsh frontier of 1885 Montana, a desperate husband auctions his pregnant wife for a single dollar, selling her like cattle to the highest bidder. As Emma Winters stands barefoot on the auction block, her fate hanging in the balance, will the mysterious single father who offers to buy her freedom become her salvation or another master? The smell hit Emma first. Sweat, dust, and desperation mingling in the hot Montana air. She stood alone on the wooden auction block, her bare feet burning against planks baked by the August sun. The crowd of Blackwater Creek gathered in the square. A sea of curious faces turned up toward her like hungry crows. $1, her husband Walter shouted, his voice cracking as he held up a crudely painted sign. Starting bid for 6 months' service. Emma's hands trembled as she smoothed her faded dress over her swollen belly. 7 months along now. The baby kicked against her ribs as if protesting this humiliation. 3 years ago, Walter had promised her a life of prosperity when they left Ohio. Now he was selling her like a broken plow horse. Sheriff Tate pushed through the crowd, his badge catching the sunlight. Winters, you can't auction off your wife. It ain't legal. Ain't selling my wife, Walter replied, wiping sweat from his reddened face. Selling a contract for domestic service. Room and board provided. He tapped the paper in his hand. Drew it up legal-like. Ask Judge Parker if you don't believe me. The sheriff glanced at Emma, something like pity crossing his weathered face before he turned away. Even the law wouldn't help her now. She can cook, clean, so better than most. Walter continued, desperation edging into his sales pitch. Educated too. Reads and writes. Bid starts at $1. The gathered townsfolk shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Others whispered behind raised hands. Emma spotted Mrs. Miller, the banker's wife, clutching her reticule tighter as she pulled her daughter away from the spectacle. Nobody's buying trouble, Winters, called a voice from the crowd. Ain't trouble, Walter shouted back. Just debt that needs settling. Emma closed her eyes, memory washing over her. The mining claim that never paid out, the borrowed money, the empty bottles piling up as Walter drowned his failures. Last night, he'd finally told her his plan, eyes downcast as he explained how this was the only way out of the hole he'd dug. $2, called a voice from the back. Emma's eyes snapped open. The crowd parted to reveal Harlan McGrew, owner of the Red Rose Saloon. His thin mustache twitched as he smiled up at her, gaze lingering on the curve of her belly. Pretty thing like her could serve drinks until her time comes, McGrew added, causing titters among some of the men. Then clean rooms after. Everyone knew what kind of rooms needed cleaning at the Red Rose. $3, came another voice. A tall man with broad shoulders stepped forward. Unlike the others in their town clothes, he wore the practical garb of a homesteader, sturdy trousers, a worn but clean shirt, and boots caked with honest soil. Beside him stood a small girl, perhaps 5 or 6, her hand tucked trustingly in his. $3 from Ethan Hayes, Walter announced, suddenly more animated. Do I hear 4? McGrew spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. 4. 5, Hayes countered without hesitation. The little girl tugged at her father's sleeve, whispering something that made him bend down to listen. He nodded at whatever she said, his expression softening momentarily before hardening again as he faced McGrew. $6, Hayes said firmly. Final offer. The saloon owner assessed Hayes coldly. You're overpaying, Hayes. She ain't worth the trouble she'll bring. 7, came another voice, Widow Carson, who ran the boarding house. I need help with the washing. Emma's heart leapt. The widow was strict but fair. Perhaps this wouldn't be. $10, McGrew snapped. Beat that, widow woman. Mrs. Carson's lips pressed into a thin line as she shook her head and stepped back. A heavy silence fell over the square. Walter looked expectantly at Hayes, who stood motionless, the little girl's face turned up to his. 10 going once, Walter called. Going twice. 15, Hayes said quietly. McGrew cursed. She ain't worth 15 and you know it. Then I reckon you'll let me have her, Hayes replied evenly. Walter couldn't hide his shock. $15 was nearly a month's wages for most men. Sold to Ethan Hayes for $15. The crowd began to disperse. The entertainment concluded. Emma remained frozen on the platform, uncertain what would happen next. Hayes approached, the little girl still clinging to his hand. "Miss Lucy," he said to the child, "would you introduce yourself to Mrs. Winters?" The girl stepped forward, a rag doll clutched in her free arm. "I'm Lucy Hayes," she said solemnly. "That's my papa. He says you're coming to live with us, 'cause you need a safe place." Emma's eyes darted to Hayes, who was counting coins into Walter's eager palm. "That right?" she asked, finding her voice at last. "A safe place is what you're selling?" Hayes finished the transaction and turned to her. "I ain't selling anything, Mrs. Winters. Just offering." He extended his hand to help her down from the platform. "The choice to accept is yours." Walter pocketed the money and hurried away without a backward glance, already headed toward the saloon. Emma stared at Hayes' outstretched hand, calloused and strong. "Why?" she whispered. "Lucy needs looking after while I work our timber claim," he answered simply. "And seems to me you need somewhere your child can be born that ain't the back room of McGrew's saloon. A choice. When was the last time anyone had offered her that?" "We have chickens," Lucy added helpfully, "and a garden, and Papa built me a swing." From across the square, Emma caught McGrew watching them, his expression calculating. Whatever Hayes was offering had to be better than the alternative. She placed her hand in his and stepped down from the auction block. "Lead the way, Mr. Hayes." As they walked toward a wagon parked at the edge of town, whispers followed them. Hayes buying himself a ready-made family. Poor Martha, not even 3 years in her grave. That child'll be born with no proper name. Hayes helped Emma into the wagon with careful hands, then lifted Lucy to sit beside her. The little girl immediately began showing Emma her rag doll, chattering about its name and the dress she'd sewn for it herself. As they pulled away from Blackwater Creek, Emma glanced back at the auction block where Walter's crudely painted dollar sign still gleamed in the sun. She'd been sold for $15 to a stranger, a man whose reason for buying her contract might not be as simple as needing help around the house. The wagon hit a rut, jostling her from her thoughts. Ahead lay an unknown life with this silent man and his chattering daughter. Behind was Walter and the ruin he'd made of their marriage. Emma laid a protective hand over her belly. For $15, Ethan Hayes had bought her service. But could he possibly understand that inside her now stirred a fierce determination he hadn't paid for? A mother's resolve to secure her child's future, whatever the cost. Ethan Hayes' homestead appeared as the wagon crested a gentle hill, golden in the late afternoon light. A modest cabin with a stone chimney sat nestled against a stand of pines, smoke curling lazily skyward. Nearby stood a small barn, a chicken coop, and what looked like the beginnings of a new structure. Just framework now, open to the sky. "That's our house," Lucy announced proudly. "Papa built it himself." Emma nodded, her throat tight with emotion she couldn't name. After years in Walter's cramped mining shack, the little homestead looked like something from a dream, tidy, purposeful, cared for. "Miss Abigail's still here," Lucy observed, pointing to an old mare tethered near the cabin. "She stays with me when Papa has to go to town." As if summoned by the child's words, an older woman appeared in the doorway, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She shaded her eyes against the sun, watching their approach with visible suspicion. "You actually did it," she called as Ethan reined the horses to a stop. "Bought yourself a woman. Mrs. Winters has agreed to help with Lucy and the house," Ethan replied evenly, jumping down from the wagon. "That's all." "That's all?" Miss Abigail repeated skeptically, her sharp gaze moving to Emma's swollen belly. "And when her time comes, what then?" "Then we'll manage," Ethan said, helping Lucy down before turning to assist Emma. "Just like we always have." Emma accepted his help, noting how carefully he supported her weight as she descended. His hands, work-roughened but gentle, steadied her until her feet touched solid ground. Lucy darted forward, grabbing Emma's hand. "Come see my room. You're going to share with me until Papa finishes building yours. Emma glanced questioningly at Ethan. Started adding on when I heard Walter Winters was looking to sell his wife's contract, he explained, nodding toward the half-built structure. Another 2 weeks, it'll be ready. You planned this? Emma asked. Something flickered across his face. Discomfort, perhaps. Planned to offer help to someone who needed it. Miss Abigail snorted. Always the savior, aren't you, Ethan Hayes? Lucy tugged at Emma's hand. Come on. I want to show you my dolls. Let Mrs. Winters catch her breath first, Ethan chided gently. She's had a hard day. The hardest day was yesterday, Emma said quietly, when my husband told me he was putting me up for auction. A silence fell, broken only by the soft clucking of chickens scratching in the yard. Miss Abigail's face softened marginally. Well, come inside at least, she said. Supper's nearly ready, and you look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks. The cabin's interior surprised Emma with its warmth and order. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with 4 chairs, and shelves lined with books. More books than Emma had seen since leaving Ohio. 2 doors led off the main room, presumably to bedrooms. Lucy, wash your hands and set the table, Miss Abigail instructed. Mr. Hayes, there's water needs fetching if we're to have tea. Both obeyed without protest, leaving Emma alone with the older woman. I don't know what story he told you, Miss Abigail said in a low voice, stirring something savory smelling in a pot over the fire. But Ethan Hayes hasn't looked at a woman since he buried his Martha 3 years ago, so don't go getting ideas. The only idea I have, Miss Abigail, is surviving until this baby comes, Emma replied, one hand moving protectively over her belly, and making sure my child has a better life than I've managed to provide so far. The older woman studied her, then nodded once. Fair enough. She handed Emma a stack of plates. Lucy puts these in the strangest places. Top shelf, if you please. By the time Ethan returned with a bucket of fresh water, Emma had helped set the table and was showing Lucy how to fold napkins into the shape of birds, a skill her grandmother had taught her long ago. Look, Papa, Lucy exclaimed, holding up her lopsided attempt. Mrs. Winters is teaching me fancy things. Ethan's smile transformed his solemn face. Is that so? Well, it's a mighty fine bird, Miss Lucy. Supper was simple. Rabbit stew, cornbread, and early apples stewed with cinnamon. But after months of Walter's haphazard provisions, it tasted like a feast to Emma. She ate slowly, conscious of eyes watching her when they thought she wouldn't notice. Lucy's open curiosity, Miss Abigail's wary assessment, Ethan's careful, unreadable glances. Where's your family, Mrs. Winters? Miss Abigail asked as they finished the meal. Emma, she corrected gently. Please call me Emma. She set down her spoon. My parents died of fever when I was 17. I had an aunt in Columbus who took me in, but when Walter proposed and said we'd seek our fortune out west, she shrugged. Seemed like an adventure. Some adventure, Miss Abigail muttered. Walter wasn't always. Emma trailed off, aware of Lucy listening intently. Things got harder after the mine failed. Men find all sorts of excuses for meanness, Miss Abigail said. Hard times just reveal what's already there. Ethan cleared his throat. Lucy. Time to help clear the table. Later, with Lucy tucked into bed and Miss Abigail settled for the night in Ethan's room. He would sleep in the barn, he'd explained. Emma found herself alone on the small porch, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Footsteps approached, and Ethan appeared with a cup of tea. Thought you might need this. Emma accepted the cup with murmured thanks. I want to be clear about our arrangement, he said, leaning against the porch rail. Your contract says 6 months of service. That's all I expect. After that, you're free to go or stay as you choose. And when the baby comes? We'll manage, he repeated his earlier words. I've delivered foals and calves. Miss Abigail has helped bring half the children in the county into the world. Between us, we'll see you through. Emma sipped her tea, studying him over the rim of her cup. Why did you really buy my contract, Mr. Hayes? He looked away, toward the half-built addition. Lucy hasn't had a woman's influence since her mother died, and I know what it is to need a second chance. Is that what this is? A second chance? Isn't that what we all hope for? He straightened, brushing dust from his trousers. Rest well, Mrs. Winters. Tomorrow's soon enough to figure out how things will work between us. As he walked toward the barn, Emma called after him. My name is Emma. He paused, looking back over his shoulder. Ethan, he offered in return. Good night, Emma. Inside, Emma eased onto the small trundle bed in Lucy's room, careful not to wake the sleeping child. Her hands skimmed over her belly, feeling the baby shift beneath her touch. We're safe for now, she whispered to her unborn child. But as she drifted toward sleep, a nagging worry followed her into dreams. Walter had never relinquished anything easily in his life. $15 might satisfy him today, but what would happen when the money ran out? And what kind of man was Ethan Hayes really to buy another man's pregnant wife? Safe, she'd told her baby. But in the wilderness of Montana territory, with winter approaching and her child's birth drawing near, Emma knew better than to trust in safety too completely. Outside, an owl called into the darkness. Inside, a child slept peacefully nearby, while a new life grew beneath Emma's heart. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. For tonight, she would accept the strange new shelter and the tentative hope it offered. A hope worth far more than the $15 that had purchased her freedom. Dawn broke with the sound of Lucy's laughter. Emma opened her eyes to find the little girl already dressed, her face pressed against the window. It's snowing, Miss Emma. The first snow. Sure enough, delicate white flakes drifted past the glass, dusting the yard with a thin white blanket. 1 week had passed since Emma's arrival at the Hayes homestead, 7 days of establishing small routines that brought unexpected comfort. Gathering eggs, kneading bread, mending clothes by firelight while Lucy practiced her letters. Snow means winter's coming, Lucy announced importantly. Papa says we need to finish getting ready. Emma eased herself up, her back aching from the small trundle bed. The baby seemed to grow heavier each day. Then we'd better help him, hadn't we? In the main room, Ethan stood at the stove frying salt pork. The scent made Emma's mouth water. Morning, he said, glancing up. Sleep well. Before she could answer, the door burst open, bringing with it a swirl of snowflakes and Miss Abigail, her arms laden with bundles. Don't just stand there, she snapped. Help me with these before the snow ruins them. Ethan hurried to take the packages while Emma pulled a chair close to the fire. Miss Abigail wasn't supposed to visit until tomorrow, but Emma had quickly learned the older woman operated on her own schedule. Fabric, Miss Abigail explained, unwrapping the first bundle to reveal lengths of soft flannel. For the baby. And, she glanced at Emma's protruding belly. Other things you'll need. Emma touched the fabric reverently. I can't accept. Not a gift, Miss Abigail interrupted. Payment. I need help with my preserving, and these old hands aren't what they used to be. You'll come tomorrow, work off the debt. It was pride disguised as practicality, Emma realized, the older woman's way of helping without making it seem like charity. Thank you, she said simply. Miss Abigail nodded brusquely. Now, let's see how that addition's coming along. Child needs a proper place to be born. Nearly finished, Ethan said, returning to his cooking. Another day or two. Best make it one, Miss Abigail replied, eyeing Emma critically. That baby's riding low. Won't wait much longer. Emma felt her face warm. It was still strange having her condition discussed so openly, after months of Walter's embarrassed silence. Lucy tugged at her hand. Can we make a blanket for the baby today? With the new cloth. After chores, Emma promised. First, we need to help your father finish that room. The early snow made for a busy day. While Ethan worked on the addition, Emma and Lucy gathered the last root vegetables from the garden, bringing them to the root cellar before frost could claim them. Emma found herself breathing heavily with the effort, needing to rest frequently. I'm slowing you down, she apologized to Lucy during one such pause. The little girl shook her head solemnly. Papa says babies are hard work even before they're born. That's why mamas are the strongest people in the world. Emma blinked back sudden tears. Your papa is a wise man. By midday, the snow had stopped, leaving the world hushed and white. Emma stood in the doorway of the new addition, admiring Ethan's workmanship. A simple room with rough-hewn walls, but sound and warm, with a small window facing east to catch the morning light. It's perfect, she told him as he fitted the door. Not finished with the furnishings, he replied, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold. Bed frame needs assembly. Got a chest of drawers to bring from the barn. I never expected. Emma hesitated. Walter said you were buying my contract for 6 months' service, not providing a room for me and my child. Ethan focused on aligning the door hinges, not meeting her eyes. Child deserves a proper start. Room of their own. Emma watched his methodical movements, the careful precision of his work. So different from Walter's impulsive schemes, his grand plans that always fell apart. Were you building this before? Before you knew about me? Ethan's hands stilled momentarily. Been meaning to add on for a while, for Lucy's sake. But Emma noticed the fresh-cut lumber, the newly mixed mortar between the stones of the small hearth. This was recent work, begun with purpose. The sound of an approaching wagon interrupted her thoughts. Through the window, she saw a familiar figure on the driver's seat. Walter, she breathed, her heart suddenly racing. Ethan straightened, following her gaze. Without a word, he set down his tools and strode outside. Emma moved to the doorway, watching as Walter's wagon stopped in the yard. Lucy ran to her father's side, sensing tension but not understanding its source. Walter climbed down unsteadily, and even from a distance, Emma could see he'd been drinking. Come to check on my investment, Walter called, his words slurring slightly. Your business is with me, not Mrs. Winters, Ethan replied evenly. State your purpose. Walter pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. Contract says I can inspect the premises. Make sure she's earning her keep. Emma stepped into the yard, one hand protectively over her belly. I'm right here, Walter. No need to talk around me. Walter's gaze shifted to her, his eyes narrowing. Looking mighty comfortable for a woman who's been sold. Mr. Hayes purchased my service, not my person, Emma replied, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. The law makes a distinction, even if you don't. The law, Walter scoffed. Since when did you become an expert? Since I started reading Mr. Hayes' books instead of hiding them like you made me do. The admission brought a flush of anger to her cheeks. 3 years you told me learning would make me dissatisfied, when all it did was show me how small you wanted my world to be. Lucy pressed closer to her father, eyes wide. Ethan rested a reassuring hand on his daughter's shoulder, but his gaze remained locked on Walter. You've seen she's well, Ethan said. Now I suggest you leave. Walter swayed slightly. Maybe I've reconsidered. Contracts got a buyback provision. At twice the selling price, Ethan observed. You have $30? Emma held her breath. Surely Walter didn't have that kind of money. But if he did, Walter's face flushed. I will soon. Made a new claim up north. Partners bringing funds next week. Then come back when you have the money, Ethan said. Until then, Mrs. Winters stays here. A tense silence followed. Emma felt the baby shift inside her, responding to her fear. What if Walter really did find money? The thought of returning to him made her physically ill. I'll be back, Walter finally said, climbing awkwardly into his wagon. You can count on it. They watched him drive away, wheels cutting dark tracks in the pristine snow. He's lying, Emma said quietly. About the new claim. It's just another of his stories. Ethan nodded. Figured as much. Lucy tugged at Emma's skirt. Are you going away with that man? Emma knelt carefully, meeting the child's worried gaze. No, Lucy. I'm staying right here with you and your father. Promise. Emma hesitated, knowing she couldn't truly promise what might be beyond her control. Lucy, Ethan intervened gently. Let's finish bringing in that furniture. Storm's not done with us yet. As if confirming his words, fresh snowflakes began to fall. They hurried inside, closing the door on the cold and the lingering shadow of Walter's visit. That night, while Lucy slept, Emma sat with Ethan at the kitchen table, sewing baby clothes from Miss Abigail's fabric. Outside, the snow fell steadily, transforming the world. "If he comes back with the money," Emma said quietly, "you'd have to let me go." Ethan set down the harness he was mending. "I bought your contract because you deserved a choice. If you choose to return to him, I won't stop you." "That's not what I meant." Emma's needle paused mid-stitch. "If he forces the issue legally, would you fight it?" "Yes." The simple word held such conviction that Emma looked up in surprise. Ethan met her gaze steadily. "I'd fight it." Something warm unfurled in Emma's chest. Not love, not yet, but perhaps its earliest seedling, trust. Outside, the snow continued falling, blanketing the homestead in white, covering Walter's tracks until they disappeared completely. The blizzard raged through the night, howling around the cabin's corners like a living thing. Emma woke to darkness and pain, her body seizing with an intensity that left her gasping. For a moment, she lay frozen, hoping it would pass. Then warm liquid rushed between her thighs, soaking the bedding. "No," she whispered, panic rising. "Not yet. Not during the storm." Another pain gripped her, stronger than the first. Emma bit back a cry, not wanting to wake Lucy. Carefully, she eased herself from the bed, fumbling for the lantern. Her fingers trembled as she struck a match, the small flame flickering to life. The door creaked open, revealing Ethan's concerned face. "Heard something. You all right?" Emma clutched the bedpost as another contraction began. "The baby, it's coming." Ethan's expression shifted from concern to focused determination. "I'll wake Lucy. Get her dressed. We need to fetch Miss Abigail." "In this storm," Emma gasped as the contraction peaked. "You can't go out there." "Have to," he said simply, already moving to wake his daughter. "Lucy, sweetheart, time to get up. We need to move Mrs. Winters to her new room." The little girl blinked sleepily, then her eyes widened as she saw Emma's pained face. "Is the baby coming?" "Yes," Ethan said calmly. "I need you to be brave and help Mrs. Winters while I go for Miss Abigail." "But Papa, the storm." "I'll be fine," he assured her, helping her into her clothes. "Mrs. Winters needs you to be strong right now." Emma watched their interchange through a haze of pain, touched by the gentle firmness with which Ethan guided his daughter. No shouting, no impatience, just quiet confidence in her ability to help. With Lucy's assistance, Emma made her way to the newly finished room. The bed, hastily assembled yesterday, had been made up with fresh linens. Ethan added logs to the small fireplace while Lucy brought extra blankets. "Kettle's heating," Ethan told her. "Lucy knows to add water when it boils. There's clean cloths in that chest." Emma nodded, another contraction building. "You shouldn't go alone." "No choice." He pulled on his heavy coat. "Lucy, remember what we practiced? If I'm not back by daylight, check the signal fire, then go to Mr. Peterson's," the child recited. "But you'll come back. You always come back." Ethan knelt, pressing his forehead briefly against his daughter's. "That's right. Always." He turned to Emma. "Trust Lucy. She's young but steady." With that, he was gone, the door closing behind him with a finality that sent a chill through Emma unrelated to her labor. The storm's fury intensified, rattling the windows like angry fists. Lucy took Emma's hand. "Don't worry. Papa knows the way to Miss Abigail's blindfolded. He says he could find it in the dark of the moon." Hours passed in a blur of pain. Lucy proved remarkably capable, bringing water, wiping Emma's brow, and speaking in a soothing voice that belied her years. Between contractions, Emma found herself wondering what kind of mother had raised such a self-possessed child, and what kind of father had nurtured those qualities after her death. "Tell me about your mother," Emma asked during a brief respite. Lucy, arranging clean cloths, paused. "I don't remember her much. Papa says she had yellow hair like mine and laughed a lot. She sounds lovely. Papa says I was the last gift she gave him before she went to heaven. Lucy's small face grew solemn. Is your baby a gift too? The question pierced Emma's heart. Walter had never seen their child as anything but an inconvenience, another mouth to feed. Yes, she said firmly. The greatest gift. By dawn, the storm had begun to subside, but Ethan and Miss Abigail had not returned. Emma's labor intensified, contractions coming faster, harder. Lucy, she gasped between pains. I think the baby's coming soon. Fear flashed across the child's face. But Papa's not back. And Miss Abigail. We'll manage, Emma said, echoing Ethan's words from days ago. You've been so brave. Just a little longer now. Lucy nodded, squaring her small shoulders. Tell me what to do. Before Emma could answer, the door flew open. But instead of Ethan or Miss Abigail, Walter stumbled in, bringing with him the cold and the reek of whiskey. Where is she? He demanded, eyes wild. Where's my wife? Lucy backed away, placing herself protectively between the newcomer and Emma. My papa's not here. You should go away. Walter advanced, swaying slightly. Move aside, girl. I've come for what's mine. Emma struggled to sit up, pain momentarily forgotten in the face of this new threat. Walter, what are you doing here? He lurched toward the bedroom door, pushing past Lucy, who tried valiantly to block his path. Coming to take you home, Emma. Got money now. $30. He patted his pocket. Enough to buy back your contract. You're drunk, Emma said, grimacing as another contraction began. And I'm having our baby. Leave now. Come back when you're sober. Walter's gaze fixed on her obvious condition, his expression darkening. That was quick work, getting yourself with child. The accusation was so absurd that Emma would have laughed if not for the pain. This is your child, Walter. The one you never wanted. Never said that. You sold me with it still growing inside me. Emma cried, fury giving her strength. Auctioned us both for $1. Walter's face contorted. I was desperate. The debts were yours, Emma finished. Not mine. Not our child's. Lucy had slipped away during their argument. Now she reappeared, Ethan's hunting rifle in her small hands. My papa taught me how to use this, she said, her voice shaking but determined. You need to leave now, mister. Walter stared at the child, then let out a harsh laugh. You wouldn't. She might not, came a new voice, but I certainly would. Miss Abigail stood in the doorway, a shotgun leveled at Walter's chest. Behind her, Ethan appeared, his expression murderous as he took in the scene. Lucy, put the rifle down, he said quietly, never taking his eyes off Walter. Miss Abigail has this handled. The little girl obeyed, running to her father, who lifted her protectively. Mr. Winters, Miss Abigail said coldly, you've picked the wrong day and the wrong house for this foolishness. Walter raised his hands, a wheedling note entering his voice. Just came to make things right. Got the money now. Fair and square. Nothing fair about selling your wife, Miss Abigail retorted. And now you think you can buy her back like a horse you regret trading? Emma cried out as the strongest contraction yet tore through her. Ethan handed Lucy to Miss Abigail, took 3 quick strides across the room, and grabbed Walter by the collar. Outside, he ordered. Now. The 2 men disappeared through the door. Miss Abigail set down her shotgun and hurried to Emma's side, her experienced hands checking the progress of labor. Baby's coming fast, she announced. No time to waste on that fool out there. Emma tried to focus on the older woman's instructions, but her mind kept straying to the confrontation outside. What would Ethan do? Walter could be dangerous when drunk, unpredictable. A gunshot cracked the morning stillness. Lucy screamed. Miss Abigail froze. Emma felt her heart stop, then race painfully. Stay here, Miss Abigail ordered, retrieving her shotgun. Lucy, come with me. No. Emma clutched the older woman's arm. Don't leave me. And don't take Lucy out there. Miss Abigail hesitated, torn between protecting those inside and discovering what had happened outside. The door opened slowly. Ethan stood framed in the doorway, blood streaming from a cut on his temple. "He's gone," he said simply. "The shot," Emma began, "fired wild. Pulled a derringer when I tried to remove him from the property." Ethan wiped blood from his eye. "Won't be a problem anymore." "You didn't—" Emma couldn't finish the question. Ethan's expression softened. "No, just convinced him that $30 wasn't worth his life. He's riding back to town." Relief flooded Emma, immediately followed by the overwhelming urge to push. She cried out, bearing down with all her strength. "Baby's coming now," Miss Abigail announced. "Ethan, take Lucy to the kitchen." "No," Emma gasped between pushes. "Let them stay, please." Miss Abigail raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "Ethan, clean that cut and boil more water. Lucy, come hold Mrs. Winter's hand." What followed was a blur of pain and effort unlike anything Emma had ever experienced. She clutched Lucy's small hand, drawing strength from the child's unwavering support. Ethan moved quietly in the background, following Miss Abigail's terse instructions. "One more push," the older woman encouraged. "The head's almost out." Emma gathered her remaining strength, pushing with everything she had. A strange sliding sensation, a momentary relief from pain, and then a cry, thin and indignant, but strong. "A girl," Miss Abigail announced, her stern face softening as she laid the squirming, bloody infant on Emma's chest. "Healthy as they come." Emma stared in wonder at her daughter's scrunched face. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair plastered wetly to her tiny head. "Hello?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, my Grace." Lucy leaned forward, her expression awestruck. "She's so small." "All babies start small," Miss Abigail said, efficiently cleaning and wrapping the newborn. "Even you." Ethan stood at the foot of the bed, his expression unreadable. "Grace," he repeated softly. "Good name." "For all we've been given," Emma explained, meeting his gaze. "Despite everything." Something passed between them then. An understanding, a possibility, a future glimpsed but not yet claimed. Outside, the storm had completely subsided. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting golden light across the new mother and child. Walter was gone, driven away by a man who had proven himself their protector. And in Emma's arms, a new life began, not with an auction block and a dollar sign, but with a grace that transcended price. Frost etched delicate patterns across the window panes, transforming the glass into canvases of crystalline artistry. 3 weeks had passed since Grace's birth, 3 weeks of sleepless nights and wonder-filled days as Emma adjusted to motherhood under the protective roof of the Hayes homestead. Outside, December had wrapped Montana in its frigid embrace, but inside the cabin, warmth prevailed. Emma hummed softly as she nursed Grace, the baby's tiny hand curled against her breast. From her rocking chair near the fire, she could see Lucy at the kitchen table, tongue caught between her teeth as she concentrated on forming letters in her primer. "Miss Emma," Lucy called without looking up, "how do you spell family?" The question caught Emma off guard, stirring emotions she wasn't prepared to examine. "Family," she spelled carefully. Lucy nodded, pencil scratching across paper. "I'm making my Christmas wish list for Santa. Number 1 is for you and Grace to be our real family forever." Emma's breath caught. Children possessed a startling ability to voice truths adults danced around. In the weeks since Grace's arrival, a comfortable rhythm had developed in the household. Ethan had proven himself a steady presence, respectful of Emma's boundaries yet unfailingly supportive. Miss Abigail visited regularly, her initial suspicion gradually transforming into grudging affection. And Lucy, dear Lucy, had embraced her role as big sister with wholehearted enthusiasm. But none of them had spoken about what would happen when Emma's 6-month contract expired. The door opened, bringing a swirl of snowflakes and Ethan, his arms laden with firewood. His cheeks were ruddy from cold, beard frosted white, but his eyes warmed visibly when they fell on Emma and Grace. "Storm's picking up," he announced, stomping snow from his boots. "Good day to stay close to home." Lucy abandoned her writing, rushing to help unstack the wood. "Papa, can we decorate for Christmas today? You promised." "So I did." Ethan's gaze shifted to Emma. "If Mrs. Winters feels up to it." Emma smiled, adjusting Grace against her shoulder. "I'd like that. And please, we've been through enough together now. Call me Emma." A quick smile transformed Ethan's serious face. "Emma, then." The day unfolded in a flurry of activity. Ethan retrieved a box of treasured ornaments from the rafters, each one carefully wrapped in newspaper. Lucy excitedly explained their significance as they decorated a small pine tree Ethan had cut and brought inside. "This one was Mama's," she said, showing Emma a delicate glass bird. "And this one Papa made the year I was born." Emma cradled Grace with one arm while helping with her free hand, struck by the bittersweet joy that permeated the ritual. These decorations held memories of Martha, the woman who should have been hanging them alongside her family. "Your mother would be proud of how carefully you're handling her treasures," Emma told Lucy gently. The child beamed. "Papa says Mama can see us from heaven. Do you think she'd like Grace?" Before Emma could form a response, a knock at the door interrupted them. Unusual, given the worsening weather and their remote location. Ethan frowned, moving protectively toward the door. "Who's there?" "Sheriff Tate," came the reply. "Need a word, Hayes?" Emma tensed, instinctively drawing Grace closer. The sheriff had witnessed her auction but done nothing to stop it. What brought him here now? Ethan opened the door, revealing the lawman stamping snow from his boots. Sheriff Tate nodded curtly to Emma before addressing Ethan. "Problem in town. Winters is making noise about his wife and child. Claims you stole them." "I purchased Mrs. Winters' contract legally," Ethan replied evenly. "Witnessed by half the town, yourself included." The sheriff sighed, removing his hat. "Contract was for her services, not custody of the child. He's saying the baby is his property by right." Icy fear gripped Emma's heart. She rose, Grace clutched protectively to her chest. "He sold me while I was carrying her. He didn't want either of us then. He wants you now." Sheriff Tate's weathered face remained impassive. "Says he's got $30 to buy back your contract. And a legal claim to his child." Lucy pressed against Emma's skirts, small face screwed up in distress. "You can't take them away. They're ours now." "Lucy," Ethan said gently, "go to your room for a bit." "But Papa." "Now, please." The child reluctantly obeyed, casting worried glances over her shoulder as she went. When the door closed behind her, Ethan turned back to the sheriff. "What exactly does Winters want?" "Says he's sobered up. Found religion. Wants to make things right with his family." The sheriff shrugged. "Could be genuine. Could be he heard about Widow Peterson leaving her property to her niece back east. Land adjacent to yours, if I recall correctly." Understanding dawned on Emma. The widow's land bordered Ethan's timber claim, valuable property with water rights Ethan had mentioned wanting to secure for expansion. "He thinks you're planning to marry me," she said slowly, "to strengthen your claim to neighboring land." Ethan's jaw tightened. Wouldn't put it past him to think that way. "Law's murky on this," Sheriff Tate continued. "Contract sale was legal, but father's rights to his child." He trailed off meaningfully. "When does he want an answer?" Ethan asked. "He's giving you until Christmas Eve. Says it's his gift, to let his wife spend the holiday with their child before he exercises his legal rights." The sheriff replaced his hat. "Thought you deserved warning." After he'd gone, silence fell heavy in the cabin. Grace fussed against Emma's shoulder, sensing her tension. "He won't take her," Ethan said finally, his voice low with conviction. "I won't let that happen." Emma paced, gently bouncing Grace to soothe her. "The law might be on his side. He's her father. A father who sold his pregnant wife for $1. Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. "No court would give him that child. But they might." Emma whispered, voicing her deepest fear. Men make the laws to benefit men. If he claims to have reformed. Ethan crossed to her, his eyes intense. There's a solution. Emma stilled, waiting. Marry me. The words hung between them, stunning in their simplicity and weight. As my wife, you'd have my protection. Ethan continued hurriedly. Grace would be under my roof legally. Walter would have no claim. You'd marry me to protect us from Walter? Emma's voice trembled slightly. A marriage of convenience? Something flickered in Ethan's eyes. An emotion quickly masked. I'd marry you because Lucy adores you. Because Grace deserves a father who chose her rather than one who discarded her. Because this house hasn't felt like a true home until you came into it. He hesitated, then added more softly. I'd marry you because I think we could build something good together, but I won't pretend it's the kind of love story you deserve. Emma studied him, this solemn, honorable man who had already rescued her once. Now he was offering to do it again, binding his life to hers permanently. The proposal lacked romance but held something perhaps more valuable. Respect, honesty, and possibility. What about Martha? She asked gently. Pain crossed his features. Martha would want Lucy to have a mother. Would want me to find peace again. He took a deep breath. I'll always carry her in my heart. But there's room there for new beginnings. A cry from the bedroom interrupted them. Lucy, likely unable to contain her worry any longer. The sound decided something for Emma. Yes, she said, the word emerging with surprising certainty. I'll marry you, Ethan Hayes, not just to protect Grace from Walter, but because I believe in the home we could build together. Relief softened his expression. He reached out tentatively, his calloused fingertips brushing her cheek in a touch both gentle and electric. Christmas Eve, then. We'll make it official before Walter can make his move. As Ethan went to comfort Lucy, Emma remained by the fire, Grace sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. Outside, snow continued falling, blanketing the world in pristine white. A clean slate, a fresh start. She had agreed to marry a man she respected but didn't love. At least, not in the way she had once dreamed. But perhaps love could grow from respect and gratitude. Perhaps it already had begun to, in quiet moments by the fire, in gentle hands passing a baby between them, in shared smiles over Lucy's antics. One thing was certain. She would not allow Walter to take her daughter. Not now. Not ever. The town of Blackwater Creek buzzed with preparations for the Christmas social when Emma arrived with Lucy the next afternoon. They had come to purchase supplies and, more importantly, to set certain wheels in motion. Emma's steps faltered as they approached the general store, memories of her auction in the square just weeks earlier washing over her. It's all right, Lucy said, taking her hand. Nobody will hurt you now. You're going to be a Hayes. The child's confidence bolstered Emma's courage. She straightened her shoulders and entered the store, conscious of conversations dying as heads turned their way. Mrs. Miller, the banker's wife, was the first to approach. Mrs. Winters, and little Miss Hayes, what a surprise to see you in town. Emma met the woman's gaze directly. We've come to order some special items for the wedding. Mr. Hayes and I are to be married on Christmas Eve. The pronouncement had exactly the effect she'd hoped for. Mrs. Miller's eyes widened, and Emma could practically see the news racing through her mind, ready to be distributed throughout town. How unexpected, Mrs. Miller managed. And the baby? She's well. Grace is thriving, Emma replied, deliberately using her daughter's name. Names held power, transformed anonymous babies into distinct persons with rights and identities. She'll be christened after the wedding. By the time they had completed their purchases, Emma could feel the ripples of their news spreading through town. Good. Let Walter hear of it from multiple sources. Let him understand that his plan had been anticipated and countered. As they left the store, Emma glanced across the street and froze. Walter stood outside the saloon watching them. His appearance shocked her. He seemed to have aged years in the weeks since she'd last seen him. His clothes were clean but threadbare, his once robust frame gaunt. Lucy pressed against Emma protectively. Is that him? Your old husband? Yes, Emma whispered. Stay close to me. Walter made no move to approach, merely touched his hat in a gesture that might have been respectful or mocking. Emma couldn't tell which. Then he turned and entered the saloon, leaving her shaken but unbowed. Let's go home, she told Lucy, her voice steadier than she felt. As their wagon pulled away from town, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Walter's apparent acceptance had come too easily. The man she had married was tenacious in pursuit of his goals, particularly when pride was involved. Whatever game Walter Winters was playing, Emma vowed to be ready. You can't marry him tomorrow. Walter's voice shattered the peaceful stillness of the chapel, bouncing off the bare wooden walls where Emma stood alone, arranging holly branches for the Christmas Eve ceremony. She whirled, heart pounding, to find her husband. No, she corrected mentally, her soon-to-be ex-husband, standing in the doorway. Snow dusted his shoulders, melting slowly in the meager warmth of the unattended stove. How dare you come here? Emma said, anger overriding her initial fear. She clutched a holly branch tighter, its sharp leaves pricking her palm. Walter stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His movements were steady, his eyes clear, sober, then, almost worse than his drunken state, for it meant his actions were deliberate. Came to talk sense into you, he said, removing his hat. You and the baby belong with me. Your rightful husband. The husband who auctioned me for $1? Emma countered, moving behind a pew to maintain distance between them. Who treated me and his unborn child as property to be sold? Shame flickered across Walter's face. Unexpected, genuine. I've done wrong by you, Emma. Won't deny it. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Been sober 3 weeks now, since the day Hayes threw me off his property. Emma frowned, surprised by this claim. Why now? After all this time, seeing you there with him, with our child, made me realize what I'd thrown away. Walter took a tentative step forward. I've changed, Emma. Found work at Peterson's mill. Steady job. Rented a proper house in town. Despite herself, Emma was curious. The Walter she had known had flitted from scheme to scheme, never settling long at any real labor. You've been working at the mill? Since when? Since I sobered up. Old Peterson gave me a chance when nobody else would. Pride colored his voice. Said I had a good head for numbers. Put me in charge of the accounts. Something about this didn't fit with the Walter she knew, the man who could barely keep track of their own meager finances. Mr. Peterson trusts you with his accounts? Walter nodded, gaining confidence. Turns out I've got skills beyond digging holes in the ground. And with his son gone back east, he needs someone reliable. Emma studied him, trying to reconcile this seemingly changed man with the husband who had sold her. What do you want, Walter? Really? A second chance. He stepped closer, his expression earnest. I've got the $30 to buy back your contract. But I don't want to buy you, Emma. I want to earn back your trust. To be the father our Grace deserves. The use of their daughter's name, the name Walter couldn't possibly know unless he'd been asking about them, sent a chill through Emma. How do you know what I named her? A flicker of something, calculation, crossed his face before he replied. Heard it in town. Folks talk. Emma's suspicion deepened. And how do you know tomorrow is the wedding? We've kept the date private. Walter's expression hardened slightly. Not private enough. Mrs. Miller told her husband, who mentioned it at the mill. Plausible, Emma conceded. The banker's wife was Blackwater Creek's most reliable source of gossip. It doesn't matter, she said firmly. I'm marrying Ethan tomorrow. Our life together, mine and Grace's, is with the Hayes family now. You don't love him, Walter stated flatly. The blunt assessment struck Emma speechless momentarily. It was true. She didn't love Ethan. Not in the headlong, passionate way she had once loved Walter. What she felt for Ethan was different. Respect, gratitude, admiration, comfort. Could that foundation grow into love? She believed it could. I respect him, she replied honestly. He respects me. That's more than we ever had. Walter flinched as if struck. We had love once. Did we? Or did you just want someone to follow you from one failed dream to another? Emma's voice rose with long-suppressed emotions. Someone to cook and clean and warm your bed while you chased gold or silver or whatever new scheme promised quick riches? Walter's face flushed. I was trying to provide for us. No, Emma said, the clarity of her realization startling. You were trying to prove something to yourself. I was just there, convenient, until I became inconvenient by getting pregnant. They stared at each other across the chapel, years of unspoken truths hanging in the air between them. Walter broke first, his shoulders slumping. I don't deserve forgiveness. Know that. But our child deserves her true father. Grace deserves a father who wants her, Emma countered, who sees her as a blessing, not a burden. I want her now, Walter insisted. Want both of you. Enough to fight Hayes for you. A chill ran through Emma. What do you mean? Fight? Walter straightened, a familiar stubborn set to his jaw. Got papers from the circuit judge. Legal claim to my child. Hayes can marry you tomorrow if he wants. But Grace is coming with me. Terror and rage flooded Emma in equal measure. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. Walter replaced his hat. Unless what? Emma demanded, though she already knew what leverage he sought. Unless you call off the wedding. Come back to me willingly. His expression softened into the boyish look that had once charmed her. Give us another chance, Emma. For Grace's sake. The manipulation was so transparent it nearly made Emma laugh despite her fear. You haven't changed at all, have you? Still trying to control everything. Everyone. Walter's face darkened. I'm giving you a choice. More than Hayes gave me when he took you away. He didn't take me, Emma said fiercely. He offered me dignity when you stripped me of it. Fine. Walter turned toward the door. I'll be at the ceremony tomorrow, with the sheriff and my papers. We'll see who Grace leaves with. After he'd gone, Emma sank onto a pew, hands shaking as she considered her options. Walter's threat might be a bluff, but what if it wasn't? Could a judge really grant him custody of Grace? The law favored fathers, she knew that much. She couldn't risk losing her daughter. But neither could she return to Walter, not after tasting freedom and respect in Ethan's home. Ethan. She needed to tell him about Walter's threat immediately. Abandoning her decorating, Emma hurried from the chapel into the crisp afternoon air. The town's main street bustled with last-minute Christmas shoppers and preparations for the evening's social. She quickened her pace, eager to reach the general store where Ethan and Lucy were purchasing supplies. She never saw Walter step out of the alley until his hand closed around her arm. One more thing, he said, his earlier veneer of civility stripped away. Hayes isn't the man you think he is. Ask him how he really met his precious Martha. Emma tried to pull free. Let go of me. Ask him, Walter insisted, his grip tightening. Ask him if he bought her too. Before Emma could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. Everything all right here, Mrs. Winters? Miss Abigail stood a few paces away, her sharp eyes taking in the scene. Behind her, several townspeople had paused, watching the confrontation with undisguised interest. Walter released Emma's arm immediately. Just having a private word with my wife. Soon-to-be ex-wife, Miss Abigail corrected pointedly. And it didn't look private or welcome to me. She moved to Emma's side, linking their arms firmly. Come along, dear. We have preparations to complete. As they walked away, Emma glanced back to see Walter watching them, his expression unreadable. Miss Abigail guided her swiftly toward Peterson's mill, where their wagon was tethered. Did he hurt you? The older woman asked once they were out of earshot. No. Emma rubbed her arm where Walter's fingers had dug in. But he threatened to take Grace. Says he has papers from the judge giving him custody rights. Miss Abigail's face hardened. That man has more schemes than a fox in a henhouse. What did he mean about Martha? Emma asked, Walter's parting shot still ringing in her ears. About Ethan buying her too? The older woman sighed heavily. Not my story to tell. But since that snake has already let it slither out, she glanced around to ensure their privacy before continuing. Martha's father sold her contract to cover gambling debts. Similar to your situation. Ethan was working at his father's store then. He bought her contract to save her from a worse fate. Just like me, Emma whispered. Similar circumstances, different particulars, Miss Abigail corrected. Martha was never married. Her father was the one who sold her, not a husband. And Ethan didn't have a child needing a mother then. They reached the wagon where Ethan and Lucy were loading supplies. Ethan's expression brightened when he spotted Emma, then quickly sobered as he noted her distress. "What's happened?" he asked, helping her up to the wagon seat. Emma recounted her encounter with Walter, watching Ethan's face darken as she described the custody threat. She hesitated before adding, "He also said something about Martha, about how you met her." Ethan froze momentarily, then continued securing their purchases. "I see. Is it true?" Emma pressed gently. "Did you purchase her contract too?" His shoulders slumped slightly. "Yes, her father sold her to cover debts. I couldn't stand by and watch it happen. Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan helped Lucy into the wagon before climbing up himself. "Didn't want you thinking it was a pattern, that I make a habit of buying women." "I would never think that," Emma assured him. "There's more you should know," Ethan said quietly, his eyes on the road ahead as he guided the horses away from town. "Martha and our marriage began as one of convenience too. Protection for her, help for me with the store." Emma absorbed this revelation. "But you grew to love her." "Yes." A simple word, heavy with memory. Didn't take long. She was easy to love. The unspoken implication hung between them. Unlike Emma, perhaps? She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the more pressing issue. "Walter says he'll come tomorrow with the sheriff and legal papers. To take Grace." Ethan's hands tightened on the reins. "Let him try. What if the law is on his side?" Emma's voice caught. "I can't lose her, Ethan." He turned to meet her gaze, his own fierce with determination. "You won't." The remainder of the journey passed in tense silence, broken only by Lucy's occasional questions about Christmas preparations. Emma's mind raced with fears and half-formed plans. By the time they reached the homestead, she had made her decision. While Ethan unloaded supplies and Lucy ran to check on the Christmas decorations, Emma took Miss Abigail aside. "I need to ask something of you," she said quietly. "Something important." The older woman listened as Emma outlined her request, her expression shifting from surprise to reluctant understanding. "You're sure about this?" Miss Abigail asked when Emma had finished. "There must be another way." "If there is, I can't see it," Emma replied. "Will you help me?" After a long moment, Miss Abigail nodded. "Against my better judgment. But yes." That night, after Lucy had gone to bed buzzing with excitement for the next day's wedding and Christmas celebrations, Emma found Ethan alone by the fire. Grace slept peacefully in her cradle nearby, tiny hands curled into fists above the blanket. "I've been thinking about Walter's threat," Emma began. Ethan looked up from the small wooden horse he was carving. "A Christmas gift for Lucy. I won't let him take her." "I know you'd fight for her," Emma said softly. "That's one of the many things I admire about you. But fighting might not be enough. The law often sides with fathers." "Then we'll leave," Ethan said, setting aside his work. "Take the children and go somewhere Walter can't find us." The offer stunned Emma, that he would abandon his home, his land, his livelihood, to protect her and Grace. "You'd do that? Leave everything you've built here?" "A home isn't timber and nails," he replied simply. "It's the people who fill it." Emotion welled in Emma's throat. This man, this good, honorable man, deserved honesty from her. "There's another option," she said carefully. "One that doesn't require running." Ethan waited, attentive. "Walter wants me back. Said he'd drop the custody claim if I returned to him." Alarm flashed across Ethan's features. "No, absolutely not." "Let me finish," Emma continued steadily. I have no intention of returning to him permanently. But if I pretend to consider it, to negotiate terms, it buys us time. Time for what? For a plan Miss Abigail and I have devised. Emma leaned forward, lowering her voice though there was no one to overhear. Judge Parker arrives tomorrow for the Christmas court session. He'll be at the social before our wedding. Miss Abigail's brother-in-law served with him in the war. She believes she can persuade him to hear our case immediately, before Walter can present his papers. Ethan considered this. What case exactly? A formal request that Walter's parental rights be severed due to abandonment and endangerment. Emma's voice hardened. He sold me while I was carrying his child. That should count for something, even under laws that favor fathers. Hope and doubt warred in Ethan's expression. And if the judge refuses? Then we implement your plan. We leave. Emma reached for his hand, her fingers wrapping around his. But I need you to trust me tomorrow. To follow my lead, no matter how strange my actions may seem. Ethan studied their joined hands, then raised his gaze to hers. I trust you, Emma. With my home, with Lucy's happiness, with my future. His voice softened. With my heart, if you'll have it. The simple declaration, not quite a confession of love, but perhaps something even more precious, touched Emma deeply. She leaned forward, pressing her lips to his cheek in a gentle kiss. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. As she rose to check on Grace before seeking her own bed, Emma felt a curious mixture of determination and peace. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, perhaps even heartbreak. But for the first time since Walter had placed her on that auction block, she felt truly in control of her own destiny. Whatever happened at the Christmas Eve ceremony, Emma Winters would no longer be a woman sold to the highest bidder. She would be a woman who had found her own worth, and it was greater than any price that could be named. You look beautiful, Miss Emma, Lucy gasped, her eyes wide with wonder as she circled Emma in the small back room of Blackwater Creek's chapel. Christmas Eve morning had dawned clear and cold, sunlight streaming through frosted windows to illuminate the simple white dress Emma wore. Borrowed from Mrs. Peterson, altered hastily by Miss Abigail's expert hands. Not a proper wedding gown, but its clean lines and embroidered collar lent Emma a dignity she hadn't felt since leaving Ohio years ago. Thank you, sweet girl, Emma replied, smoothing nervous hands over the fabric. Are you sure you don't mind sharing your father with me? Lucy shook her head emphatically, sending her ribbon braids dancing. I asked Santa for you and Grace to stay forever. He's just giving me my present early. The child's innocent acceptance brought tears to Emma's eyes. Despite the circumstances that had brought them together, an auction block, a desperate bargain, a dollar sign, Lucy had embraced Emma with an open heart that humbled her daily. A soft knock interrupted the moment. Miss Abigail entered, Grace bundled in her arms and a concerned expression clouding her usually stern features. Judge Parker is here, she announced quietly. But so is Walter. And Sheriff Tate. Emma's pulse quickened. Did you speak with the judge? Briefly. He agreed to hear us before the ceremony. Miss Abigail's mouth tightened. But Walter got to him first. Been spinning quite a tale about reforming and deserving another chance. He's lying, Lucy burst out indignantly. He's a bad man who sold Miss Emma like a chicken. Hush, child, Miss Abigail admonished, though without real heat. Adults are handling this. Emma took Grace from the older woman, drawing strength from her daughter's solid warmth. Where's Ethan? Keeping Walter away from the judge. There in the main chapel with Reverend Collins. Miss Abigail adjusted Emma's collar with fussy hands. Remember our plan? Judge will hear both sides, then make his ruling. If it goes against us, Ethan and I will leave with the children, Emma finished. Head for Oregon country. The contingency plan felt desperate but necessary. Emma would not allow Walter to take Grace, even if it meant abandoning their hopes for a settled life here. There's one more option, Miss Abigail said hesitantly. Judge Parker mentioned it might simplify matters if what? If Walter were to formally relinquish his rights to Grace. Sign papers surrendering his claim. Emma laughed bitterly. He'll never do that. Grace is his leverage to force me back. People can surprise you, Miss Abigail replied cryptically. Sometimes even the Walter Winters of this world catch a glimpse of their better nature. Before Emma could question this odd statement, the door opened again. Ethan stood framed in the doorway, his Sunday suit brushed free of dust, hair slicked neatly back. His solemn face brightened momentarily at the sight of Emma in her wedding dress, then sobered again. "Judge is ready to hear us," he said simply. "Lucy, you stay with Miss Abigail." "But I want to help," the child protested. Ethan knelt to her level. "You are helping. By watching over your sister." He nodded toward Grace. "Can you do that for me, Button?" Lucy's expression remained mutinous, but she nodded. "Yes, Papa." After transferring Grace to Miss Abigail's capable hands, Emma took a deep breath and smoothed her dress one final time. Ethan offered his arm, a gesture both protective and steadying. "Whatever happens in there," he said quietly, "we face it together." The main chapel buzzed with hushed conversations that died abruptly when Emma and Ethan entered. The Christmas decorations, holly boughs and pine garlands Emma had arranged yesterday, created a festive backdrop at odds with the tension filling the room. Judge Parker sat behind a makeshift desk near the altar, his imposing figure and stern countenance lending gravity to the impromptu proceedings. Walter stood nearby, startlingly respectable in clean, pressed clothes, hair trimmed and face freshly shaved. Sheriff Tate hovered at the judge's elbow, evidently uncomfortable with the situation but determined to maintain order. Reverend Collins, who had been scheduled to perform the wedding ceremony in just 2 hours' time, looked particularly distressed by this unexpected legal intervention. "Mrs. Winters, Mr. Hayes?" Judge Parker acknowledged them with a curt nod. "Unusual circumstances bring us together this morning. Mr. Winters has petitioned for custody of his natural child, currently in your possession." "She's my daughter," Emma corrected firmly. "Not property to be possessed." The judge's bushy eyebrows rose slightly. "Indeed, that is precisely the matter we must settle." He shuffled through papers before him. "I understand Mr. Hayes purchased a 6-month labor contract from Mr. Winters, but the child was not explicitly included in this transaction." "The contract was for Mrs. Winters' services," Ethan confirmed. "But when a man sells his pregnant wife, he forfeits any moral claim to the child she carries." Walter stepped forward. "I made a terrible mistake, Your Honor. One I'm deeply ashamed of." His voice carried a humility Emma had never heard from him before. "I was desperate, drinking heavily, not in my right mind, yet clear-headed enough to draw up a legal contract," Ethan observed dryly. Judge Parker held up a hand. "I'll hear each party without interruption." He turned to Walter. "Mr. Winters, you abandoned your pregnant wife by selling her contract. Some might view this as surrendering your paternal rights." "I never intended to give up my child," Walter insisted, "only to secure necessary funds during a difficult time. I've since reformed, Your Honor, secured steady employment, established a proper home, stopped drinking entirely." Emma couldn't contain her skepticism. 3 weeks of good behavior doesn't erase years of neglect and cruelty. "Mrs. Winters," the judge chided, "you'll have your turn." Walter continued, his expression earnest. "I'm simply asking for the chance to be a father to my daughter, to make amends to my wife." "Ex-wife," Emma corrected. "I'm to marry Mr. Hayes today." "Which brings us to another complexity," Judge Parker noted. "Mrs. Winters, would you share your perspective?" Emma straightened, gathering her courage. "Your Honor, I stood on an auction block in this very town while my husband, the father of my unborn child, sold me to the highest bidder. Had Mr. Hayes not intervened, Grace would likely have been born in a brothel or on the streets." Murmurs rippled through the assembled townspeople as Emma continued. "Walter never wanted this child. He saw my pregnancy as an inconvenience, another mouth to feed. Only now, when he sees me established in a respectable home with a man who treats me with dignity, does he suddenly discover fatherly feelings." She turned to face Walter directly. If you truly care about Grace's well-being, you'll let her stay where she's loved and secure. Walter met her gaze, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. For a moment, Emma glimpsed the man she had once loved, before ambition and alcohol had twisted him into a stranger. Judge Parker cleared his throat. Mr. Hayes, as the purchaser of Mrs. Winter's contract and her intended husband, what do you propose as a resolution? Ethan stepped forward. Your Honor, I believe children belong with those who cherish them. Grace has a home with us, with her mother, with Lucy who adores her as a sister, with me. His voice softened. I may not be her blood father, but I've held her since her first breath. I'm prepared to raise her as my own, to provide for her future, to give her my name and protection. The judge nodded thoughtfully, then addressed Walter again. Mr. Winters, what exactly are you seeking today? Walter hesitated, glancing toward Sheriff Tate, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. Initially, I came for custody of my daughter, Walter admitted, and hoped my wife might reconsider our separation. But now, Judge Parker prompted. Now Walter's composure faltered. I'm not sure. An unexpected voice spoke from the back of the chapel. If I may, Your Honor? All heads turned as Miss Abigail came forward, Grace in her arms and Lucy trailing behind like a determined shadow. Mrs. Carson, the judge acknowledged. This is an official proceeding, and I have official testimony to offer, Miss Abigail replied crisply. As midwife to half this county and witness to the birth of the child in question. Judge Parker gestured for her to continue. Miss Abigail fixed Walter with a penetrating stare. Mr. Winters, do you recall where you were when your daughter entered this world? Walter shifted uncomfortably. I was indisposed. You were drunk in town, Miss Abigail corrected bluntly, while your wife labored during a blizzard, while your child drew her first breath without her father present to acknowledge her. She stepped closer to Walter, tilting Grace so he could see his daughter's face clearly. This child has never known your touch, never heard your voice, never received anything from you but rejection. Beginning before she was even born, Walter stared at the baby, something complex and painful crossing his features. Grace Winters, Miss Abigail continued more gently, deserves better than to be a pawn in a game of pride. If you truly care for her welfare, you know what you must do. A heavy silence filled the chapel. Emma held her breath, watching Walter's internal struggle play across his face. Finally, he turned to Judge Parker. Your Honor, I'd like to amend my petition. Emma felt Ethan tense beside her. Instead of custody, Walter continued slowly, I'm asking for occasional visitation, to know my daughter. Nothing more. Gasps and whispers erupted from the onlookers. Emma stared at Walter in disbelief, searching for the hidden agenda behind this sudden reversal. Judge Parker leaned forward. Are you formally relinquishing your parental claim, Mr. Winters? Walter swallowed hard. If Mrs. Winters and Mr. Hayes permit occasional visits, then yes, I'll sign whatever papers necessary. Walter, Emma whispered, stunned by this unexpected capitulation. Why? He met her gaze directly, more honest than she'd seen him in years. Because Miss Abigail's right. Grace deserves better than to be used as leverage. He glanced toward Ethan. She has a good home, a father who wants her. I won't tear that apart out of pride. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, moved despite herself by this glimpse of the man Walter might have been in different circumstances. Judge Parker brought proceedings to a swift conclusion after that, having Sheriff Tate witness as Walter signed papers relinquishing his paternal rights while establishing limited visitation privileges, to be exercised only with Emma and Ethan's permission. As the townsfolk dispersed to prepare for the evening's Christmas social, Emma found herself alone with Walter near the chapel door. Thank you, she said simply. Walter nodded, an unfamiliar humility in his bearing. I meant what I said about changing. Not for you, that ship has sailed. I can see that now. His gaze drifted to where Ethan stood with Grace and Lucy. But maybe I can still become someone my daughter won't be ashamed to know someday. "I hope you find peace, Walter," Emma replied, surprised to discover she meant it. He touched his hat in a gesture of farewell. "Be happy, Emma. You deserve that." As Walter walked away into the bright winter morning, Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the final remnant of their troubled past releasing its hold. 2 hours later, standing before Reverend Collins with Ethan's steady hand clasping hers, Emma spoke her vows not from necessity or gratitude, but from a place of genuine hope. This marriage, begun as a practical arrangement, now held the promise of something deeper, respect blooming into affection, friendship deepening into love. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Collins declared as Christmas bells began to ring across Blackwater Creek. Ethan's kiss was gentle, affirming rather than claiming. When they turned to face the assembled well-wishers, Emma felt Lucy slip a small hand into hers on one side while Ethan, cradling Grace, stood strong on the other. A family forged not by blood but by choice, worth far more than the dollar that had set her journey in motion. Spring transformed the Montana landscape, melting snow into rushing streams and coaxing tender green shoots from soil long frozen. On the Hayes homestead, new life abounded, seedlings stretching toward sunlight in the expanded garden, chicks peeping in the coop, calves wobbling beside their mothers in the small pasture Ethan had fenced during winter. Emma stood on the porch, watching Lucy guide Grace's first tentative steps across the yard. At 5 months, Grace was determined to walk before crawling, stubbornly pulling herself upright at every opportunity. Lucy, now 6 and deeply invested in her role as big sister, provided endless patient encouragement. "Just like her mother," Ethan observed, coming to stand beside Emma. Determined to do things her own way, the casual compliment warmed Emma. For months of marriage had established a comfortable rhythm between them, a partnership based on mutual respect that grew more affectionate with each passing day. Ethan remained reserved by nature, expressing his feelings through actions rather than words, but Emma had learned to read the language of his care. Coffee prepared before she woke, a wildflower placed on her pillow, fingers gently brushing hers when passing the salt at dinner. "The Petersons' wagon," Lucy called, pointing down the long drive where dust rose behind approaching wheels. Emma shaded her eyes against the bright April sun. "Must be Mrs. Peterson bringing those seedlings," she promised. But as the wagon drew nearer, she realized it carried not Mrs. Peterson but Walter, sitting beside young Jim Peterson who handled the reins. Her body tensed instinctively, though the reaction lacked the fear that once accompanied her ex-husband's presence. In the months since the Christmas Eve ceremony, Walter had exercised his visitation rights just twice, brief, awkward encounters where he'd held Grace stiffly while making stilted conversation. Each visit had ended with apparent relief on both sides, leading Emma to wonder if he would eventually abandon this tentative connection to his daughter. Yet here he was again, climbing down from the wagon with a large wooden object tucked under his arm. Ethan moved subtly closer to Emma, a protective gesture she appreciated even as she recognized it was likely unnecessary. The Walter who approached now bore little resemblance to the desperate man who had once threatened to take Grace. Steady employment at Peterson's mill had filled out his gaunt frame, and his clear eyes and steady gait testified to continued sobriety. "Mrs. Hayes," Walter greeted Emma formally, then nodded to Ethan. "Hayes. Winters," Ethan replied evenly. "Unexpected visit." Walter shifted the wooden object. A cradle, Emma now saw, beautifully crafted with intricate carvings along its sides. "Finished this at the mill yesterday. Thought Grace might use it." Lucy had gathered Grace into her arms and approached cautiously. "You made that?" she asked Walter, curiosity overcoming her usual wariness around him. "I did," pride colored Walter's voice. "Old Peterson's been teaching me woodworking. Found I have a knack for it." Emma studied the cradle with genuine admiration. The craftsmanship was exquisite, curved headboard adorned with delicately carved roses, rockers perfectly balanced, every edge sanded smooth. "It's beautiful," she acknowledged, though Grace has nearly outgrown her cradle. "Figured as much," Walter admitted. "But maybe," he hesitated, glancing at Ethan. "Maybe it'll be useful again someday." The implication hung in the air between them. Emma felt her cheeks warm as Ethan's hand found the small of her back, a subtle gesture that neither confirmed nor denied the possibility. "Thank you," Ethan said simply, reaching to examine the cradle more closely. "Fine workmanship." The men carried the cradle inside while Emma prepared coffee, the domestic scene striking her with its strangeness. Her former husband and current one moving around each other with cautious civility, Lucy trailing behind with questions about woodworking that Walter answered with surprising patience. Later, as Walter prepared to leave with Jim Peterson, he lingered in the yard, watching Grace toddle between Emma and Lucy. "She has your determination," he observed, "and your eyes." "But your chin," Emma replied, surprising herself with the observation. "That stubborn little chin is pure Winter's." Walter smiled faintly. "Poor child." His expression grew more serious. "I'm heading west, Oregon country. Mill's sending me to establish timber contracts with the settlements there." "That's a long journey," Emma said. "When will you return?" "Might not," Walter admitted. "Peterson's offered me a permanent position managing their Pacific operations." Good opportunity. Understanding dawned on Emma. This was a goodbye gift. Walter nodded, looking toward Grace once more. "She has a good home, a father who cherishes her. My presence would only complicate things." He straightened his shoulders. "Sometimes the best thing a man can do for his child is step aside." The insight, so contrary to the Walter she had known, left Emma momentarily speechless. "She'll know of you," she finally promised. "When she's older, I'll tell her about her birth father. How he made her this beautiful cradle with his own hands. Tell her I'm sorry too," Walter said quietly, "for the auction block, for selling what should have been priceless." As Jim Peterson's wagon disappeared down the long drive, Emma felt a sense of closure settling over her like the tender green leaves unfurling on the cottonwoods. The wounds of the past hadn't vanished, but they had scarred over, becoming part of her story rather than defining it. That evening, after the children were asleep, Emma joined Ethan on the porch where he sat watching the first stars appear. Without speaking, she settled beside him on the bench he'd built during the winter evenings, their shoulders touching comfortably. "Walter's gift was thoughtful," she said after a companionable silence. Ethan nodded. "Man's changed. People can," Emma agreed. "Given the right circumstances, the right support." Her thoughts drifted to her own transformation, from desperate woman on an auction block to respected wife, mother, and partner in this thriving homestead. The journey had begun with humiliation but led to unexpected dignity. "His comment about the cradle being useful again someday," Emma ventured carefully. "Did that trouble you?" Ethan turned to face her, his expression thoughtful in the gathering dusk. "Troubled? No." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. "But it raised a question I've been meaning to ask." Emma's pulse quickened. "What question?" "Our marriage began from necessity," Ethan said slowly. "Protection for you and Grace. A mother for Lucy. Practical matters." "Yes," Emma agreed, uncertain where this was leading. "But these past months," he paused, seeming to search for words, "they've become more than practical for me." The simple admission sent warmth cascading through Emma's chest. "For me too." Ethan's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "If we were to have a child together, not from necessity but from love, how would you feel about that?" "Love." He had spoken the word so naturally, without the awkwardness she might have expected, and in doing so, had named the feeling that had been growing between them through winter's intimate evenings and spring's shared labors. "I would welcome it," Emma replied softly. "A child born from choice, not circumstance. A child who would never know an auction block or a dollar sign." Ethan leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently against hers. "I love you, Emma Hayes, not because you mother my daughter or keep my home, but because of who you are. Your strength, your kindness, your determination. And I love you," Emma whispered back, the words feeling both momentous and completely natural. "Not because you rescued me, but because you saw my worth when others missed it." Their lips met in a kiss deeper than any they had shared before. Not the formal seal of a wedding ceremony or the gentle goodnight of established routine, but a true communion of hearts that had found each other despite unpromising beginnings. Inside the cabin, Grace's cradle sat waiting. Not just a gift from a departing father, but a promise of future possibilities, of a family continuing to grow in love and purpose. 1 year earlier, Emma had stood on an auction block, her value reduced to a painted sign and a dollar amount. Now she sat beneath Montana stars, her worth measured in love freely given and received, in children thriving under her care, in a partnership founded on respect and blooming into devotion. No price could be placed on such treasures. They were, quite simply, beyond value, just as she had been all along.